The other thing that you're telling people or encourage people to do is recognize, one, the value in what comes out of their mouth, because people will pay you for what you have inside of your head. I mean, amazingly enough, if they're coming to you, there's a value. If a lot of people are coming to you, it means that you've established yourself as an authority somehow in the minds of people around you, right?
Yes.
And so then to make sure that when you're talking to somebody, that those things are essentially captured. Because I know I've done it the same thing. I've listened, I was talking to somebody and they started talking about the difference between, Vimeo and YouTube and some of these other things. And I literally went, oh my gosh. And I created an article out of the conversation, just like what you're talking about, that was used for distribution. So that's the thing you're talking about, isn't it, Bob? So what are some other ways?
One of the things that we like to do when we have someone, let's say we have a C-level executive that wants to write a book. He doesn't have time. He doesn't really know how to go about outlining it. He doesn't feel like he's a writer. He doesn't feel confident about creating a book. What we've discovered is when you have someone else interview you, just like you and I kind of do to each other, we will sit down with someone. I've sat down with a person and started asking them questions, either filming it or recording it. And when someone forgets that they're on camera, when they forget that there's a recorder on the table, and I start asking them more and more questions, they start remembering things. They'll tell me stories about, I'll say, well, that's interesting. Has that ever happened to you? And so they'll tell me a story about when it did happen to them. And as you get into the interview and you really get into that space, something begins to be created. They're very animated in telling you those stories, and they remember things and come up with things that when we go to take that interview and turn it into content for a book for that person, sometimes they read the book and they say, did I say that? And we say, yeah, we've got the recording. And there's just something about interaction with people that's important. And so that's one of the ways, if one of you that are listening want to get content and stories out, find somebody to interview you and record it. Sit down with someone and have them ask you questions over and over. And of course you have frequently asked questions that you get by email. People ask you, how about this? How about that? Another thing for you to consider is, what are the questions that you know that people should be asking you? And when you're interviewing somebody, or if they're interviewing you, have them ask you, well, what is it that people never think to ask you of, but they should be asking you? That's where you start drawing on some of that expertise that's bottled up inside of someone.
Well, I consider that to be one of the most valuable things. What is it that people should be asking you? When we're sitting here doing the show, we're trying to give you tools, tips, techniques that are going to give you ways to essentially extract that, I call it 9-pound pearl. It's the thing you paid more than you expected to, and everybody else recognizes that you're the authority in that space. Well, if you go to morepowertopublish.com, go to Bob's conference in May, or the one in December in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, October, November time frame in Dallas-Fort Worth, you're going to love what you see. You're going to learn so much about all the things we're talking about. We'll be right back. This is Pat Dewar on Monetize Your Mind.
You can become a published author. Discover a system that will lead you from idea to having your book on the bookshelves. Bob Baer pulls back the curtain at the More Power to Publish workshop. Watch and learn how to follow the step-by-step plan to turn your idea into a published book. Learn more at morepowertopublish.com.